Hi guys, T here, back for part 2 of how to craft a campaign. Today we're going to be going over customization and cartography. That is, fine-tuning your campaign with its own flavor and deciding the lay of the land based on your story. So if you haven't seen part 1, go back and see that, and then you'll be able to continue with part 2. So you've got your story laid out in front of you. You know the sweeping epic tale or the three-part adventure or whatever have you, and you've planned kind of the size of your game. And that's very important to start out with, like a framework on a house. You know what you're working with now, so now we can start filling in some of the details. So one of the first things you need to do as a DM straight away, once you've figured out your story and your setting and your threshold of levels, is to lay down your house rules. Now, house rules can be one of two things. They can either be circumstantial or subjective. Circumstantial house rules are things that fit into your setting no matter what. Like, you might say, in your land where the story takes place, necromancy is frowned upon and considered evil. So nobody can take necromancy unless you just want to be on the run from the law. Or your campaign takes place in a desert region, so there's no point in having any ranks in swim. You can just mark swim off your character sheet. Things like that. And then there are subjective house rules, which are usually, to be honest, old scars that your DM has that he just doesn't want to deal with again. My personal house rules are that I don't allow spider climb, because every single person that I've ever seen use spider climb just abuses it at all times. They circumvent traps, they don't go through dungeons, they go up castle walls, they use it all the time. They basically build like Spider-Man with, rogue abilities, and you work hard putting together dungeons for people to traverse, and if somebody just climbs across the whole thing on the ceiling, then, you're not really playing the game, you're just skipping everything, basically cheating. I've seen other DMs that don't allow Dimension Door. I had one DM that didn't allow Fireball and Lightning Bolt. I don't know why. Maybe he saw a few too many maximized spell wizards that were doing, that 10d6 of fireball damage and just blowing things up. Don't be afraid to say, hey, no necromancy. Don't be afraid to say, I don't even know. The main ones that I've seen are Spider Climb, Necromancy, and Dimension Door. Don't be afraid to cross a few things out, whether it be, things that get abused or things that don't apply, like Flight, Spider Climb, like mounted combat. I had one campaign that took place in like a rabid jungle that no horse could traverse. So the DM said, no mounted combat. There's not going to be any way for you to get a horse through this thick jungle environment. And if you did, it would just break its ankles the first time you tried charging. So think about anything that you might want to cross out, not only for your benefit, but for your players. The next thing to do when you're customizing your campaign is to get a page of lore for your characters, for your players to have. If you're inventing your own world, unless you're just going to go with the cookie cutter medieval Western Europe, temperate weather with a king and queen and stuff like that, you need to inform your players what you're getting into. Like if you have like a desert campaign, again, you can say, there are 9 pyramids, and there's a pharaoh and his daughter, and the queen died, and, there's a council of 9, and the population is this much. You need to do basically an essay, if you've got a unique setting, to tell your players the world around them, because, they're not playing as children, they're playing as adults, and as adults living in this region, they would know all about it. So you need to write like 5 paragraphs, basically, a short, like 1 page essay, and give each of your players this page so that they know what the world around them is like. So if you were going to like describe the United States as a setting, you'd be like, well, there are 50 unique territories with their own governors, and then there's a president, and the electoral college and Congress, and so on and so forth, and they re-elect their main leader every 4 years, and they are a warlike people, and they've got problems with immigration, and they've got a set of islands out to one side where everybody goes on vacation because everybody loves Hawaii and things like that. Or if you've got a very small finite place like a town or a county, be like, okay, if you're from Shepherdsville, which is where I grew up in Kentucky, there's a lot of eateries there, and there's no buildings any taller than 3 stories. The town is small enough to see across, but there's a major road that goes by next to it, so lots of traders and people from out of town often stop in to eat their fill before they continue to travel on. There's no means of entertainment. There's there's a small school there, and that's about the entire town. Everybody freaked out when they opened a library there, 10 years ago. Give them 5 paragraphs worth of details about where they are, or where they're from, or where they're going, so that they can kind of tailor themselves. And again, I'm harping on the Egyptian style campaign, but like, if you have a society that is deeply entrenched in tradition and religion, then you might be more likely to see a cleric pop up, or a paladin, a holy warrior. People might revere the gods more than normal, so they're more likely to carry holy books, scrolls, holy symbols. In a desert region, canteens are a must, so somebody might spend the 1,000 gold and get the decanter of endless water, things like that. Tell them everything that they oughta already know. You can surprise them with the story, you can surprise them with monsters, you can surprise them with plot twists. Don't surprise them with the setting. That's not only irresponsible, but that's out of character. They ought to know what's going on around them because, they're at least 20 years old in character, so they should know everything about what's going on around them. So you're basically giving them a short version of all the stuff they should already know when they're moving into your setting. Like, if they live in a desert region and they have there's a rainstorm, every 6 months, and that's when people gather all the water that they possibly can and put it in a reservoir, and now suddenly there's 2 rainstorms every 6 months, and people are wondering why. That could be your quest. Why does the frequency of rain keep increasing? Is there going to be a great flood? Things like that. People get worried when extreme environments start changing, even if it's for the better, with things like increased rain or decreased rain. They'll know something unusual is going on if their setting starts shifting, but they're not going to know it's shifting if they don't have a core set of rules to fall back on. After you've decided your house rules and your lore that you're going to tell them, decide what books you're going to use. And yeah, this is a fairly basic thing to know, but just keep in mind your power gamers, keep in mind your number crunchers, keep in mind your brand new players that see, this stack of 20 books and you say, okay, go crazy, and they get completely overwhelmed. Obviously, you'll allow the core books, because that's where all the base stuff comes from. The DMG, the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, etc. Or if they want to be an exotic race, make sure they clear it with you, because, it's from this book, and this is why I want to be that. Make sure they come and okay it with you. And then, you can think about, the Complete Warrior, Song and Silence, Sandstorm, the Magic Item Compendium, anything Like, if they go reaching into a weird book, you should probably know why. And if they're doing it for like a weird, min-maxing sort of thing, you might discourage it. But like, there's no reason, most of the time, there's no reason for players to reach into like the Necronomicon or shoot, what is it called? The Book of Vile Darkness, the books that are usually meant for DMs, unless they're reaching for like a specific feat or a specific item. It's good for you to know, not to build against it, but to understand what is coming, because if they have the knowledge to reach into an exotic book for one thing, chances are there's a really big reason why, and you should know. So some DMs I've seen, they just say, okay, just the core books and just the complete books, or they'll say, just the core books, and you can reach into the DMG for magic items, and that's it. Or you can have Song and Silence and Sword and Fist, and those are the only two books you can have. Like, it's almost like climate control. Like, if you only have the core books, then there's only X amount of things they can do. But if you know of like broken combos of things that are just going to come up, and they're going to come up because you know your players, don't be afraid to ban books. Just be like, no, I don't want you reaching into the Advanced Player's Handbook 3 for such and such weird ass feat or class or whatever. Just be like, just these like 6 books, these 7 books, much like your finite crafting with your campaign, keep their character creation finite so that they don't create something like Pun Pun. And if you don't know what Pun Pun is, you'll be able to Google that. Pun Pun is a 4th level druid who can make himself into a god through complete following of the rules. He was basically a thought experiment, but he's a 4th level druid that can pump his stats to infinity, and I think use the wish spell with no repercussions. But he technically follows all the rules and regulations of D&D. But you don't want a Pun Pun at your table. You don't want, the level 3 wizard that can sling, 30 damage worth of fireballs 6 times a day and things like that. And we'll go into a different video for character creation and things like that. But decide the books you're going to use before you start crafting anything, so that you'll know what you have to build for and what you have to build against. Next topic, as far as like customization goes, you must make sure when you've got your story set down, your players should at all times have a primary objective. Like, there should never be a time where they take a step back and they go, why are we doing this again? And you can have any basic reason, like, oh, we're treasure hunting, or we're going to retrieve, X gem or ring or MacGuffin, whatever it happens to be, or we're going to rescue so-and-so, or the princess, or our husbands, our wives, whatever it happens to be. Before they even say, I go gather information at the very beginning of the first campaign, they've read off their lore from their books, or from the page that you gave them. If you go more than 10 minutes and they don't have an objective of some kind other than like downtime, they'll wander off the reserve. They'll start trouble. They'll do something. I mean, they don't need you to hold their hand, because that's not what D&D is, but they do need a general direction to go. Like, if you drop them in the middle of the world and don't tell them what to do or what they need to be doing, you need to go to the pyramid and then go to its core to discover the treasure, or you need to travel to the other end of this canyon and meet the sage so he'll tell you about upcoming rainstorms. You're fighting in this war. You need to protect this town from all incoming waves of soldiers. You're playing tower defense, basically. They need to know as soon as possible, and they need to know in as much detail as they can what the objective is. And no matter what it is, they'll try to pursue it. It's just the lack of an objective, or a I guess like the lack of a quest or an idea of what they're actually doing, will cause trouble, and it will cause trouble quickly. So make sure you've got that hammered out before you even start, which will help you as far as building the reserve and not the world. So if you've got an entire campaign that takes place in a desert region, then all you've got to do is build that desert region. There's no reason to build out beyond the sea, or beyond the mountains, or south into the jungles, because the entire campaign takes place in one spot. And if you have trouble building like a map, you're like, God, I've got to build a 500 square mile desert. I have no idea how deserts are formed or how they're done. Just take a regular map and like turn it on its side. Like I think I had a campaign once that took place on a map that was like Florida upside down, and instead of being surrounded by ocean, it was surrounded by mountains. So they probably recognized the shape, but they didn't think about it because that was just the way the map was set up. And I know it sounds like I'm constantly telling you to trim the fat, get rid of as much stuff as you can. And I know you can't do that too much, because it will lead to like a hallway situation where no matter what you do, you always have to go forward. There's no escaping, there's no choices. You're going to have to judge that for yourself, because yeah, they could wander off into the mountains, but there's really nothing there, so you kind of have to coax them back onto the reserve. Just make sure the reserve is small. It's sized for your campaign, but it's big enough that other stuff can happen. Like if you have an area the size of Florida, that's fine, but if it can be smaller, great. And if you can, you can put an ocean on one side and a mountain on another side, and a desert expanse, to serve as artificial borders for whatever you happen to be doing. And they'll have plenty of space, but don't have more. Like if you were going to run a campaign that took place in Kentucky, they don't need a map of the entire United States. Or if you're going to have a map that takes place in the inner sea, if it takes place in one of the towns there, then there's no reason to have an entire continental map. The map loses all its value the further out you pull the lens. So just keep that in mind, to have only really use the parts of the map that you're going to need. Otherwise, it becomes confusing, it becomes overwhelming, and your players just won't use the map. So just size your reserve, size the importance. What am I trying to say? Only make enough map, only make enough world that you need, and then maybe expand it by 10 or 20%, so they don't feel like they're boxed in. So they'll always know, oh, we can go there, but we can also go over there because there's a source of water, or there's a rumor of treasure, or there's a nymph fountain, or a forest of illusions, or whatever it happens to be. Sprinkle in more stuff than you need, but keep it small, keep it finite, so that you won't overwhelm your players with too much stuff. There's no reason to give them a map of the entire country if they're just going to be in the small, like, southeastern corner of it. So that's all I have to say today for customization and cartography, so please join me next time for part 3. Keep gaming.